This is my third time with you in a row out of a 5-part series that Lindsay began with you. And I'll just mention again who I am. My name is Cliff Jones. I live about, well, without traffic, just over 40 minutes south of here. Retired last year from the St. Paul's Presbyterian Church in Laurel Springs. And due to a connection, a mutual connection that Steve and I have, his name is Stuart. I was asked to come and to help you think through Christian stewardship. Now, just remind me, what is Christian stewardship? What? Giving of our time, money, and talent to me. To me. Oh, to God. Darn. Okay. Time, money, and talent to God. We've been hearing a lot about, time, talent, and money. Okay. We've been hearing a lot about giving money, or I've heard it, time, talent, and treasure, to God, right? And that's what we're doing today in worship, which is great. Talent would be the spiritual gifts and abilities that God gives us to help others as part of God's mission to our world. But we don't hear very much about time. So today I'd like to explore with you the issue of time as part of the wider topic of stewardship. Because, as I hope we'll find, time is also very important in terms of how we live out our faith in Jesus Christ in the world. So here's what I'd like to do. If you would find a Bible, we're going to look at Ephesians 5, chapter 5, verses 15 and 16. And what I love to do is just remind people, if you hold your Bible outward like this, and you divide it in half, and you open it up, and then you take the right side and open that side, that right side up, and or divide that in half and open up, you should be in somewhere in the New Testament, the new part. And then Ephesians is, gosh, I don't know, how do I say where Ephesians is just in general terms? It's in the back part. It's a very short book. It's part of 4 very short books: Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. It's after the 4 Gospels at the beginning, and then after Acts, and then you get a few other books as well, and then you get to Ephesians. Ephesians 5, verses 15 and 16. Who would like to read that for us? Great, thank you. Interesting passage, isn't it? In fact, I'm just going to say this. As you were reading that, I noticed your face, because reading along, and then we get to, because the days are evil, and there was just a slight puzzlement or slight difference in your face, as it should be, because what does that mean? Because the days are evil. Isn't that an interesting word used there? So let's see if we can understand this passage. First, of course, as always in understanding anything, we need to understand the context. So if you'll go back to the beginning verse of the 5th chapter, my translation says, "Be imitators of God," which is in itself an astounding word to us, isn't it? "As beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us." And walk in love. How do you walk in love? I'll just say this fast. He's not talking about physically walking. Right. Yeah. I'm walking in love, but I'm not this way. I mean, like, what does that mean? No. So walk in love. Walk is just used metaphorically there to mean how we live. Live in love. So we are to imitate God, and we are to live imitating God and living in love. So that's kind of the heading for this chapter. And then he goes in, we're not going to read it, but then he goes into how we should not live, some very specific adjectives and adverbs in terms of how we are not to, and then he gets into how we are to, and that comes down to let's see. Okay, so then that takes us all the way down to verse 13. Then we get to verse 14. Therefore it said, awake, O sleeper, and rise from the dead, and Christ shall give you light. I've heard two different interpretations of this. One is that this is a reference to when, through Christ's resurrection, when we are resurrected with Christ, we will be surrounded by that light, and the light of Christ will resurrect us. I prefer, however, the understanding that this is a baptismal, ancient baptismal formula, that as people were baptized, then they were then said, arise, O sleeper from the dead, not literally that you're dead, but you're dead now to your sins, and you were dead in your sins, but now in the light of Christ, you rise to new life. That's how I kind of prefer to understand that. And then in verse 15, and it's going to continue to talk about how should we live then in the light of Christ. Verse 15, look carefully how you walk, that is, look carefully how you live, not as an unwise person, but as a wise person. So how are we to live in a wise way? Well, we'll find many ways we are, but the first thing that he says in terms of wise living, right, is to make the most of the time. Make the most of the time. Have you heard this from your parents? Make the most of your time. What are some of the other expressions that we use about time and making sure we use it well? I was thinking of this, and now, of course, I can't remember the expressions. Carpe diem, seize the day, right? What? Time is gold? Great. Yeah. Okay. All these, pardon? Time is fleeting. Yeah. So what does he mean by make the most of the time? But before we do that, before we talk more specific about that, because the days are evil. What does that mean? Because the days are evil. What is he talking about there? Well, I did a little bit of looking into this, and of course, when you look at what different people, the scholars say, they'll say different things. So this could mean the days are evil, that the Apostle Paul, in writing this, given his surroundings and circumstances, is talking about, Christians go through persecution, they go through difficulty, they go through hard times as well as good. And so in that sense, we could say the days are evil. Or perhaps he is talking about the fact that, in this world in which we live, it is non-Christian in so many ways. It's not focused upon God. It's not focused upon how God wants us to live. That's why we have to pray each week, your will be done, your kingdom come on earth, let it come on earth, and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, because it's not here yet. So in that sense, it could be that the days are evil. It could also be that the Apostle Paul is saying that Satan is alive and active in our world, and so it's not a holy world. So in that sense, it's evil. Or it may be, I picked this up, kind of intriguing, an intriguing idea, is that in Genesis chapter 3, God, in response to Adam and Eve's disobedience to God, wanting to go their own way and disobey what God had said to them, God then brings a harshness and hardness to work and to childbearing. And in that sense, because of human sin, this world and the days are evil. And it could be that all that is accurate. So I don't think that the Apostle Paul is saying that the world is horrible and you need to get out of it. He's just trying to be realistic. That's what I think he's trying to say, that the days are evil in that way. So let's take a look at what this means to make the most of the time because the days are evil. The word that's used to make the most of time literally means to redeem time. It's an economic term, one that you would use if you were going shopping. What are you going to redeem? What are you going to buy? And it's an intensified verb. In other words, there's an added punch to it to say, make sure that you're really grabbing for time. And if you're going to use it, and it's used, as I'm saying, economically in terms of redeeming, getting it, making sure you have it. So there's a force to it. Now, he's not talking about money, he's talking about time, but he's using that concept to emphasize, make the most of time. Make the most of the time because the days are evil. The word that he uses here for time is kairos. This is a different word that can be used for the normal passage of time. If I took my phone out and wanted to know what time it was, I would ask what time it was, chronos. And in English, we use that word, that prefix, chron or chronos, for different words. I'm intentionally being a little vague. Anybody got an English word that uses that stem, chronos? Gosh, you are smart. You're right. Chronology. There are other words that are used that have to do with time in terms of marking time. What hour is it? This is a kairos time. And while we don't need to make too much of this, I just want to bring out that in the Greek mythology, kairos was actually a god, the god of opportunity. Isn't that interesting? The god of opportunity. And here's the fun thing for me. He's portrayed differently. He's bald, except he has a lock of hair on his head. Where is it? No, not in the center. That's a good, nice guess. It's not in back. It's in front. The idea is opportunity comes rushing towards you. Grab it as it's coming towards you, because once it passed, you can't grab it. Isn't that an interesting? These are ancient Greeks understood opportunity. Carpe diem, as you mentioned. So here it comes. Better get it fast before it's past you. And this God of opportunity was also seen as very fast. So better grab it, because once it's passed, it's gone. So if we acted out, what the Apostle Paul is saying is, make the most of the time because the days are evil, right? Make the most of the time before it passes you by. Make the most of your time. In Colossians, the 5th chapter, no, there is no 5th chapter. Where was it? Oh, the 2nd chapter, verse 5. Sorry. Is that going to be it? Nope, it's not there. Did I write it down? Let's see. Just real fast. He uses the same kind of concept, almost the same exact words. Colossians 4:5. Sorry. There was a 5 in there somewhere. Colossians 4:5 says, conduct yourselves wisely towards outsiders, making the most of time. Isn't that interesting that the Bible has some things to say about time? The time is very important. It's part of our stewardship. It's so important. Make the most of a time. Let's look at a couple of other translations. Does anyone have the New International Version translation? Yeah, would you mind just reading those two verses, Ephesians 5, verses 15 and 16? Did you hear that? Making the most of every opportunity. So the New International Version wants to bring that idea out. Make the most of every opportunity. Some of you have a Bible that I put out here. I don't know if it's whatever it's black with the gold band. Yeah, is it good news? If someone has that, could you read those two verses? Anybody have that? Oh, okay. Okay, so they use that word redeeming, literally. Yeah, that economic term. Okay. The Living Bible says, be careful. So be careful how you act. These are difficult days. See how they translate because the days are evil. Don't be fools, be wise. Make the most of every opportunity you have for doing good. Make the most of every opportunity you have for doing good. So now let's get practical. How are we going to do that? What does it mean to redeem the time? What does it mean to make the most of every opportunity? And how do we go about doing that? Well, I got online because, that's how you learn how to do everything, right? You go online. And I came across this ad from a time management company that said, find more time for yourself. Who would like to find more time? I think we'd all like to find more time. Oprah.com, the source of all wisdom, said this. I picked this up before. Here's the quote. We will show you how to get 7 more hours a day. Wow. Can you imagine? Just think about that. I would imagine that most of you have already thought about what you're going to do today, right? And it goes like this. Okay, I have to do this. Then I have to do this. Then I have to do this. And you kind of think to yourself, okay, that'll take me to dinner time. And then after dinner, I'll try and do this, this, and this, right? And then I'm going to get to bed late. Now, I don't know what late for you is. I'll say 11 or 12. But imagine if you had 7 more hours. Like, whoa. I could watch a football game. I could, go out to eat. I could read a book with 7 more hours. Of course, what would happen is we'd fill the 7 more hours with stuff that we had to get done. But still, 7 more hours. Let me ask you this question. How much would you be willing to pay? And I'm not going to sell you anything. Don't worry. How much would you be willing to pay to get 7 more hours a day? And you say anything less than $10,000, I won't believe you. But just think about that. 7 more hours a day. I'm going to write Oprah. That's what I'm going to do. How do you do that? How many hours are there in a day? 24. So how do you get 7 more? Let's talk a little bit about some principles that have to do with time. First, there are only 24 hours in a day. No one can give you 7 more hours. Now, you know what they're saying, right? You can act and use time more wisely, right? But let's just be honest. There are only 24 hours in a day. And here's something else I'd like to say. God gives you all the time you need. Oh, that's an interesting concept, isn't it? God gives you all the time you need. That's why they're 24 hours in the day. Set the sun and the moon in their course, and they're 24 hours. That's all the time you need. So the issue is not how can I find more time, right? Because you can't find more time. There is no such thing as more time. That's not the issue. Second aspect I'd like to mention, time is not our master. Sometimes, and I think this happens pretty often to us, we're doing so many things, or things are taking so much time that we feel a pressure trying to get things done. So to my shame, this week I picked up my grandson, one of my grandsons. He's just turned 4, turned 4, sorry, and he's in preschool. I picked him up, and I had to get onto Zoom for my class, and I was going to get all set up at his house. I picked up a little early, but not as early as I wanted, and I knew even going to pick him up that I was going to be late according to the time schedule. The class started at 3. I was picking him up at 10 to 3, but I didn't pick him up till 2:56. Fortunately, his home was very close by, but I literally dragged him across the parking lot from his preschool into the car. And I lifted him in the car. Normally, I let him take his time to get into the car. So I get in the car seat, and he said to me, "Granddaddy, why are you hurrying? Why are you rushing?" And I said, "Because I'm late for my class." Like, right? I felt the pressure of time to get there, to get done, to get set up, and to get into the Zoom conference. I think that's how we live more than we want to admit. The pressure of time. But time is not our master. It's something we use, but it's not our master. And here's the third thing. We are not the master of time either. I wanted to say I love this passage. I really don't love the passage, but it's just so true. If you can find James, the book of James, the 4th chapter, verses 14 and 15. James, the 4th chapter, verse 14 and 15. And this comes with a warning: you're not going to like what you read. I'm just going to tell you that. But if someone would read that for us, please. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So let's look at that. James 4:14 and 15. In fact, I'm going to read verse 13. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and get gain, whereas you do not know about tomorrow. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and we shall do this or that. This is not a passage about money. This is a passage about how we view time, where we think that we can plan out our life, we can plan out our day, and it will follow in the order in which we have planned it, and it will take a place in the time that we allot to it. Let me ask you this question. When was the last time that the day ended and you said to yourself, wow, this day went exactly as I planned? Has anyone had that day this week? I mean, I'd like to rejoice with you. I really would. No, darn. Yeah, I haven't either, right? But we think as the day begins or as the week begins that, I'm going to do this. What a great reminder that our plans never happen exactly as we want. And in fact, we're not in charge of time. So who's in charge of time? God is. Look again at this passage. Again, verse 13. Come on now. You who say, oh, today or tomorrow, we're going to do this, this, and this, whatever it is. They use the example of buying and selling. But you don't know about tomorrow. And by the way, we don't know about today either, do we? What is your life? You're just a mist that appears for a little time, then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, because it's the Lord's will. So those principles to get us started. We can't, God has given us all the time we need. Time is not our master, and we don't own time, but God does. So how do we make the most of our time? I'm going to offer 4 suggestions that you can take home and think about. And I've also given you conveniently pencils. Feel free to take notes if you'd like. First suggestion is to answer the question, what is your life vision statement? What is your vision for life? Let me give you some illustrations of that. This is not a mission statement. A mission statement says, this is what I'm going to do. That's not a vision statement. A vision statement is a statement that captures your attention, that captures your inner desires and says, this is the statement that will lead my life. It's a couple illustrations. Anybody want to guess what the vision statement, not the mission statement, the vision statement of Otis Elevator is? What did somebody say? Going up and down? Yeah. It used to be we move people, but they've changed it. At least I thought that was their vision statement. So here's their vision statement now. We give people freedom to connect and thrive in a taller, faster, smarter world. Notice what they didn't say. Their mission statement could be, we'll help people move up and down. Did you get the first part of it? We give people freedom. Now, I wouldn't have thought of that for an Otis Elevator Company statement. You give freedom to connect. Oh, now if I'm working for Otis Elevator Company, instead of just saying, okay, we're making this elevator to get people in down. No, we're doing something more than that. We're giving them freedom. Now that's something I can tie into. That inspires something, or may inspire something inside of me. Freedom to connect, not just to move them, but to connect them. I have an important part to play in that because that's important. It's a vision statement is something that inspires my capacity to do, to make, but also to envision something bigger beyond myself. What's your vision statement? Here's my vision statement. I do not live a life of success as some consider success, but I believe I live a life of significance. That has guided me in terms of being a pastor. And then when it got time for me to retire, next question, what do I do with my life, right? What do I do with my life? So I had two options. Well, I had three options. One is I could say, well, I'm going to watch TV the rest of my life or work on my computer. But I knew that wasn't going to really satisfy me, right? Option two, I could look around to see what I could do. Maybe I could volunteer here. I've seen people, because I've gone to hospitals more than the average person, there are always volunteers there at the front desk. If you need to get a room number, that tends to be a volunteer. Or where else could I volunteer? I can volunteer at a food bank, a soup kitchen. There's something called Urban Promise in Camden. They always are looking for some great stuff to do. So I could have gone that route too. I chose instead to try and think through what is the vision statement that will inspire and attract me to what is in line with that vision statement in my retirement. And very quickly I said, well, actually the vision statement I've had works real well for the future. What is something where I can say to myself at the end of the day, I have lived significantly? Doesn't mean it was successful, but significantly. And so I chose to go back to school and learn how to teach English as a second language or as a foreign language, because I want to live significantly. And how I know that I'm connected to that is because Thursday night, I'm in my last class, but Thursday night was my first class teaching Ukrainian refugees. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I was up, I was awake, I could not get back to bed, and I knew very well that I was not going to be able to get back to bed. That is, I never do that. I always either sleep through, or if I get up, then I go back to bed. And sometimes it even takes 20 minutes to go back to bed, but I still go back to bed. I was so excited about what I'm going to do Tuesday night in teaching these refugees and how we're going to work together. And I could do this and I could do that and I could do this and I could do that. This is going to be great. It's going to take work. What am I going to do? I haven't even graduated yet. I'm in my second time with them and I want to make sure that they learn. I want this to be productive for them. What am I going to do? Oh, I was just filled with ideas. Have I communicated my excitement? Why? Because it's attached to the vision. What's my vision statement? I'm going to lead a life, not necessarily of success, but of significance. That's what's guiding me. Once I get that down, that isn't actually here. It's the base of what I do. Now from there, I move to the next phase. Does that make sense? What is your vision statement? So how do you do that? Well, it doesn't come easily, probably. I don't know many people that say, oh, I know what my vision statement is, and it's actually a good vision statement. It takes time. And I've worked with people about developing a mission statement, and it suddenly dawned on me, the reason why it's hard in developing a vision statement is because it's God's way to help us get to the vision statement. You understand? Let's see, how do I say it? That the hard part of the work is all part of developing a vision statement. A vision statement takes time to keep asking, what is it, God? What is it? What's my vision that you want to give me? And in the struggle and in the frustration of not getting an answer, God is using that, moving you forward, even though you don't know it, through that way. So the hard and the frustrating part, because it does take weeks often, to try and figure out what is the vision statement that God wants me to have, that, and you keep asking it and you keep thinking it through and you keep praying it through, and it's like, oh, I'm not sure, but nothing is coming. Nothing is coming. Why isn't anything coming? That's all part of the process of God moving. So how do you do that? First, prayer is one way. There's some other, whoops. Yeah. Have I told you that I'm a great artist? Anybody remember last week? Okay. Did you ever grow up? Did you ever get one of those, get those little magazine or pamphlets for grade school kids on connecting the dots? And you have all these dots on the page, and each one is numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so, you know, and finally, as you're working on it, the shape begins to emerge. It's like, oh, it's a horse. But all it was first was dots. We'll see how this works out. Anybody know what this is? Yeah. You weren't supposed to see it that clearly. I'm an artist. Let's see what the star looks like. Yeah. So at first you don't know what things are, but if you connect the dots to your life. When in your life did you feel energized? When in your life did you feel the smile of God in terms, and what were you doing during those times? When were those times when people said to you, wow, thank you. That was really helpful. And you begin to connect the dots. Oh, it was this time and this time and this time and this time and this time. And each of those times had, I can see now, there was some commonality between them. There's some common things that all kind of made sense. So you begin to connect the dots. I even missed the dot. I'm that bad. There we go. Yay. Yeah. So you begin to connect the dots is my point. What are those times when said you felt energized, the times when you felt God's smile on you, the time when you heard people say to you, gosh, that was helpful, or thank you, I appreciate that. So the first step is the vision statement. Then the next step, anybody want to guess what the next step is? What are your values? Again, that's may have thrown you there a little bit. What are your values? What is most important to you? What do you value? Surviving the day? Making it through the day? Staying employed? How about integrity? Jesus? Love? Compassion? What is the number one predictor of whether a child will grow up to attend church as an adult? And whether it's family? Yeah. So there have been studies that have said that a child raised in the church where the mom takes the child to church is obviously helpful, but it's the father that's even more important than the mother in terms of his attendance, whether that child will, as an adult, attend church. Isn't that interesting? Just percentage-wise, as they've done studies. But even more important than the father is, if there are two parents, that both parents are regularly in church, helping to raise the children, of course, and then in church. That's the highest percentage if both husband and wife attend church. Why do you think that would be? Who cares where it's the child's decision ultimately, right? Particularly as an adult, whether they go to church or not. So why would the parents attending church make such a difference? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Parents set an example. Sure. Somebody else? Yeah. Yeah. In the end, that child will not depart from it. Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to suggest, however, that we're not raising our children to attend church. We're raising our children to love Jesus. Now, obviously, church attendance is important. I say all that to just give you my belief that the top 2 or 3 values of a parent will be taken on by the child. But there's a caveat. And that's the reason why I say 2 or 3 values, because the child not only needs to see the parent doing whatever that value is, but see the parent doing it consistently and seeing a bedrock commitment by the parent to that value. So for instance, a parent could say to a child, always tell the truth. But if the parent doesn't always tell the truth, the child's not going to take on that value. So what are the 2 or 3 most important values that you hold? And this is really broader than parenting. The issue here is, what are those 2 or 3 values that you are strongly committed to, that people, if they were asked to describe you, would probably hit in their description of you? What is it that that influences the way in which you live? And so, once again, that takes some time on your part to try and distill what are the most important values. The values determine how we live out our personal vision statement. Okay? So let's stop there. And let me just ask if there are questions at this point, and then I'm going to ask you to do something. Does this make sense? Okay. Do you have your pieces of paper? Remember on the inside, you wrote the 1, 2, or 3 things, or the 3 things in which you spend the most time on a regular basis, right? Okay, on the outside, or on the other side, if you've been taking notes, doesn't make a difference. I'd like you to write your top 3 priorities on a weekly basis in terms of what you really want to accomplish. Like this coming week, if you could only do 3 things, what are most important to you to accomplish this week? And I don't want it to be just this week specific. Like this week could be make sure I get the turkey in the oven, right? No, I'm not, don't be that specific. But on an average week, what are the top 3 things? If you could only do 3 things, what would those be? And again, you can't include sleep. That, no, sorry. I understand that's a real priority, but other than sleep. Take 60 seconds to do that. Everybody done? I made sure the bell would ring right then to say you're done. Okay. Now you know what the next step is, don't you, right? What's the match between what you wrote on the inside and what you wrote on the outside? Because that leads us to the next step. And the step is actually not sequential. The step is building from the base up. So the first foundational step is what is my what? What is my vision? What is my vision statement? The next step is what? What are my values? So the vision statement is where I'm heading. The value statement is how I'm living day by day, acting out that vision statement. Then the third step that gets built on that is what are my goals for the week? What are my goals for the week? What are the things I have to get done? And I'm going to write those down. So I've noticed in retirement, and this is notice in retirement, when I don't write down what I'm going to accomplish for the day and actually put time next to it, like at 10:30 I'm going to do this, 12 o'clock I'm going to do that. If I don't do that, I don't get nearly as much done as if I actually had goals written with time included. Writing goals is actually a way of being accountable to yourself. This is what I want to get done, and this is what I'm going to get done. And then the last step would be, how am I going to prioritize the things I want to get done on a daily basis? So if my goal for the week, let's just use the goal for the week is I'm going to prepare and I'm going to serve Thanksgiving dinner. That's a goal for the week. So that means that tomorrow, one of my activities is I got to go to the store and make sure I got everything I need food-wise, right? Then I've got to go to the paper supply store and make sure I got paper napkins and paper plates, because I'm not about to do dishes on Thanksgiving. I'm just going to tell you that. Whatever else I need to get done. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to start preparing which dish, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last thing I do is I prioritize what I'm doing first, second, third, A, B, C, D, E. Do I need to write that, or does that make sense? Okay, makes sense. So vision statement, values, goals, activities. What happens if we forget vision and values and I don't need all that stuff. I know I'm going to write down what I have to get done this week. And then I'm going to write down each day what I'm going to get done. I'm going to prioritize. I'll just do that. That's okay. I'm not going to go through this hard stuff and try to figure out my vision and my values. What happens if we just concentrate on those last two pieces? Yeah. Exactly. You have nothing to really guide or lead you. Now time becomes a pressure to get things done. What am I getting done? At the end of the day, I got things done. Is that how you want to live your life? I got things done. Marcia Smith, born 1946, died 1940. She got things done. Cliff Jones, born 1954, died, you can fill in the date. He lived a life of significance. What's your vision statement? How are you choosing to redeem the time that God has given you? Because that's part of stewardship. It's not only about money. It's also about how we use the gifts God has given us, the spiritual gifts and abilities, through time, using the way of time, using time as God's gift, just like money and just like talent, right? That's how we do that. I came across a quote that caused me to read this book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. I'm going to read this quote. I love it. The word priority came into the English language in the 1400s. Okay. It was singular. It meant the very first or prior thing, and it stayed singular for the next 500 years. Only in the 1900s did we pluralize the term and start talking about priorities. Illogically, we reasoned that by changing the word, we could bend reality. Oh. The word priority means one, most important. So why are we talking priorities? How can more than one thing be first? So what's your priority in life? I hope it's Jesus. How are we going to steward our life? Well, I hope you'll consider at least setting a vision statement, figuring out what's most important to you. And then after that groundwork is laid, then weekly goals or monthly goals as well. And then above that would be activities. A couple of comments I'd like to make to end. I've been heavily influenced by Franklin Covey. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that organization. I've taken a couple of seminars that really helped me understand time and time management. My understanding is the founders, at least of part of that company, were, or I should say are, I think Mormon. So I'm always looking at it with a slight grain, I'm looking at it carefully, but so far what I found, I think, is fine and biblical. But they come from a perspective as well of trying to honor God. Good for them. But if you are interested in pursuing this, I tell you that's where I got this from. And I appreciate their emphasis on the vision and the values first before just, okay, how better to use your time. I'm going to give you 7 more hours of time a day, right? That kind of philosophy. The second thing I wanted to just mention is give you another example of how the vision statement connects with finding what you are going to do, where God might be leading you. Because I think developing a vision statement is part of discerning God's will for our lives. And we each have different vision statements. And we have some different values. We should have some common values, but we might have different values. So one of my values is trust. And that may not be your top priority. That's fine. But that's one of my top priorities. My top priority was my children seeing Jesus, now my grandchildren seeing Jesus, expressed in me. They saw me reading the Bible. They saw me praying in my time. They knew when I would be doing that. And hopefully they didn't see too much hypocrisy in what we said and what we did, my wife and I. And when we did, we asked forgiveness. And I mean, anyway, as a result, all three of them have come to know Jesus. I didn't lead them to Christ, and I'm fine with that. But I believe that what we set into home got them to the place where others could lead them to Christ. But trust would be one of my three top values. And so I'm going to tell you this little story. Trust, when our kids were little, I just kept saying to them, we have to trust each other. So that means we can't lie to each other, and what we promise we'll complete. And that was just kind of a basis. So when my son was, I guess, about 8 or 9 years old, we were living in El Paso. One day, this neighbor boy lived next to us, said, "My dad says your son is stealing soda cans out of our garage." I'm like, "Oh, that's not good." So I called my son, and we had a conversation. And he said, "No, I'm not doing that, Dad." I said, "Now remember, trust is so important, right? And you've got to tell me if this is true. If it's not true, I have your back, son. I will go over and I'll talk to the neighbor man. But I'm not going to, please, don't put me in a position where you're lying to me." And then I go over and talk to him. "I'm telling the truth." Okay. So I went over to him, to the man, and I believed my son. And interestingly, my son found his way to be in the background during this conversation in the garage, open garage of this neighbor. And I went up to the neighbor, and I have to say, I was mad at him for accusing my son of stealing, whom I trusted. And I said to him, "You will not talk to my son that way, and you will not accuse." I did it in that tone of voice. And afterwards, I thought, that's probably not a bad idea. My son heard me speak in that tone of voice. My voice might have been slightly more elevated than what I just did. And I have no apologies for that. And the neighbor man said, "Oh, fine, I won't." So when my son was 17, he was actually a senior. It was the fall, senior in high school. My wife and I were invited to a wedding, and we really wanted to go. So we went, and one of my daughters was still at home. She stayed with a friend in their house. My son stayed with another friend and his parents. And I said to my son, "You will not come into this house, right? And you're not going to invite anybody in this house." Right, great. So we go away, have a nice weekend. We come back Monday afternoon. My neighbor, this is a different place, on one side was outside. He saw me. He said, "Hey, so what was going on in your house Saturday night?" "What do you mean?" "Well, there were 2 police cars in front of your house." Now, you're laughing. My heart dropped, because you have to understand, trust is one of the most important values in our family. And for my son to betray my trust, I went almost immediately to God. And I tell you, I was crying. I just like, how could this happen? How could he disrespect me that much? How could our trust be broken? But as you know, I'm just such a wise. Do you know not only am I a great artist, I am a very wise parent. Did you know that? So I say to myself, I'm not going to confront him, because he'll lie. If he lied about that, he's going to, Saturday night and had people over, he's going to lie when I say what happened. He'll say, "Oh, I didn't do anything." So the next morning at 7:30, I'm at the police station. I have talked to a very nice detective. He goes on his computer to find out the police report, right? He's looking at me, says, "That's interesting. What was the night?" "It was just Saturday night." "Yeah, the date." "Right." I don't have a report. Now, there was a police stop a block away. And I think to myself, okay, maybe one party goers was, driving too fast, but this doesn't sound right. Why are the police not putting a report in, unless it was like the policeman's like, "Oh, it was a nuisance call. It was too noisy." And I just didn't write it up. And I'm thinking, but wouldn't they have asked to talk to the parent? Isn't it obvious that they're a bunch of, what's wrong with our police? Okay. So that night, and of course, my mind and my spirit is in all kinds of turmoil. I get home late that night, and I call the neighbor on the other side, because the neighbor who told me said, "Actually, I don't know very much." When I tried to question him, the guy on the other side, he knows more. So I call him up at 9:40 when I get home from a church meeting, and I say, "I have to talk to you now about Saturday night." There's a slight pause on the phone, because it was 9:40. And he said, okay. So I go over. I mean, the atmosphere is tense, it's just tense. I'm like, oh, yeah. So we sit down and I say, I understand from the neighbor over there were 2 police cars at the house Saturday night. And he said, you knew more about it. What happened? The guy lowers his head. And I'll tell you, at least 5 seconds go by. There are times in your life when 5 seconds is an eternity. And I'm saying to myself, oh boy, this must be really bad. It must have been horrible for him. He doesn't want to tell me, but I'm going to make him. He after 5 seconds, he goes, Cliff, I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, he doesn't want to tell me. It's that bad. So I go home. I can't sleep. I'm crying to God. This is horrible. I finally decided I'm going to have to confront my son. No one is telling me anything. Why won't they tell me? So the next day I say, son, I understand that there were 2 police cars according to the neighbor next door at the house. Tell me what happened Saturday night. You know what he says to me? He says this. I was kidding, Dad. It's a practical joke. I told the neighbor to tell you that. Nothing happened. I go back. It's confirmed with the neighbor. Oh, yeah. He said, Even to this day, we laugh. Well, my son laughs about it. But because trust was that important, I went through all those hoops. And my son keeps laughing about it, but it keeps reinforcing the importance of trust. What are the 2 or 3 things that are most important to you that will help you live out your vision statement and will help others also know the kind of person that you are? Let's pray. God, thank you for your word and for those around us who can help us live life, redeeming the time, making the most of the opportunities before they have already gone by us, to help us live a life that's pleasing to you, and that also gives us joy, and that also gives us excitement, and gives us a sense of purpose in living. Thank you. Amen. Thank you all.
For Jesus, there was no room. Slowing down and making room. So I think you're going to really enjoy that. I think it's going to be very meaningful and reflective and helpful to you. So that starts 2 weeks from today. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody. I do hope you've made your plans for how you're going to get the turkey ready and prepared and thought through all of those things. But Cliff, again, thank you so much. Great.